Welcome back to the BK Petcast. I'm Bryce.
I'm Kenzie.
And we are the creators of the BK Pets. We're here to help you enrich and extend the lives of your dogs and cats at home. And today we're joined by a special guest. This is one that we've been working with for a decent amount of time now, but very excited to have on. This is Amy from We Feed Raw. And if you don't know, We Feed Raw is a balanced raw dog food that's shipping all over the U.S. and doing some really incredible things. So Amy, thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to do this with you.
So to get started, just let us know a little bit about who you are and specifically kind of how you got started in this raw feeding journey and ended up, kind of taking over We Feed Raw.
Yeah. So I am one of the co-founders and the chief brand officer at We Feed Raw, which, as you mentioned, it's a direct-to-consumer meal plan service that delivers complete and balanced meals to dogs all over the country. I'm sort of, I guess, as the chief brand officer in charge of the whole brand ecosystem. So, the branding, the feel, the look, everything that has to do with, sort of the branding of We Feed Raw across various media channels. So it's a position that sits beside the CMO, the chief marketing officer. And I just sort of ensure that we're delivering a cohesive brand message across all channels. And that can, go into social advertising, to email marketing, to even just the whole overall customer experience. I think because we're an online brand, we rely heavily on, social media to connect with both our active customers and our prospective customers. As you guys know, we're really active on Instagram and we're, becoming more active on TikTok. And it's really a place that people like to share their own We Feed Raw meals. They like to learn from, the information that we're offering. And it's just a really nice sort of way to connect with our customers and people that are interested in raw feeding.
Yeah,
so
very cool.
That tells you a little bit about,
Absolutely.
And that said, while my primary focus is, on branding and marketing, we're still a very small, tight-knit team. So I have my hands in all different areas, and that can, range from helping with customer service to PR work to even compliance-related tasks and working closely with our PhD nutritionist. So, still very much acting as a founder, I guess, in a lot of ways too. My sister really was the founder of the first version of this company. It was way back in 2009. My sister was a dog lover from childhood, and she grew up to be a big rescuer of dogs. She had like 10 rescues at one time. So, in caring for and feeding them, I know it's crazy. It was like home to the world's friendliest wolf pack is what we would call her house. But, she, in caring for them and feeding them, she started to think more critically about what she was putting in their bowls. And that's when she discovered raw feeding, like a lot of us do, And so once she switched them from a highly processed dry diet to a fresh, raw, biologically appropriate one, she immediately saw the benefits. And, once you see the light, you can't unsee the light. It was just, there was no turning back. Mm-hmm. So she started making raw meals, became an expert at making raw meals for her own dogs. And then she started making them for friends' dogs and then friends of friends' dogs. And the business just grew organically from there. I would say it's like a little different than, the way a lot of businesses start out, which is like, you recognize an opportunity and then try to capitalize on it. I think she was just really trying to do something good for dogs. And out of that, an opportunity presented itself, So this was around, again, 2009. She and her fiance, Rich Reel, he was also a co-founder. They just came together to really make this a real business. So he had been a chef, so he was really good at making the food and the production and manufacturing side. And my sister, was really like the visionary, and this was her big idea. They just were this great team. She did the business side of things, and they delivered fresh raw meals door to door in Austin, Texas, where they were living at the time. So, would drive around in their own car and deliver it to their customers.
In the trenches.
Yeah, it was really, in the trenches, totally. So this was going well for a few years. They had a nice, healthy, growing business. They were happy with it. Not looking to grow super fast or anything. It was definitely keeping them busy. And it was right around the same time that people started to become much more interested in this way of feeding, or at least an alternative to kibble. So the tailwinds were always sort of in the favor of this company. Around 2013, actually, my sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So it was really a hard time for all of us. She continued to work on this business for, the entire time she was sick, up until the last week of her life, even, with an incredible amount of suffering. She just really cared about this, and it was her passion. She ended up passing away a little over a year after her diagnosis, at the end of 2014 on December 23rd. And my family and I, despite being, very just grief-stricken and, in a lot of pain, we also knew that we couldn't let this business die. It was really an extension of her. It was as hard as it was to be like, okay, well, now we have to go make sure this business doesn't die. It was also like cathartic to have it and put our energy into something that was really an extension of her. Sure. So my dad came out of retirement to sort of run the business side. My sister's fiance, Rich, went back to running production, working a really labor-intensive schedule. And I went back to New York City, where I also had another full-time job in marketing, and made this my second job. So I really focused on growing the customer base, just developing the brand, securing outside funding. And during this time, I also just I was sort of in charge of spearheading a total rebrand. So at this point, the company had never really been a brand. It was always just like a supplier of raw. And I really thought we needed to, especially with marketing and my background, we needed a cohesive brand that conveyed the philosophy of what we were doing, and also the amazingness of the product. This is like such a great product, and we really didn't have the brand showcasing that. So that's what I did, and that's what we did as a family. And we've kept her vision and legacy alive, and we've grown a lot since then. We've brought other team members on, and it still remains a labor of love for sure. Yeah. And everyone that comes to work here feels that and is connected to the brand because of that. And I still film my sister all the time, and she's definitely with me. So yeah, that's the story of how it all began.
That's amazing. And one thing that really stuck out to me with what you said is this did not start because of a hole in the market. A hole in the market existed. There's some people that were starting to be interested in fresh food. But to give everybody a little context, Kibble started because somebody saw sailors eating hardtack and thought they could sell it to dogs. This raw feeding company started because they fed raw food and saw the unreal benefits from it. We were talking about before the podcast, we just did an episode with Dr. Billinghurst, and he said, we were talking about how there's, not a lot of studies on raw food. There's not any studies specifically looking at the benefits of raw food versus kibble for the entirety of a life. He said there might not be those like big studies to back it, but he said, I have 40 years of experience watching kibble-fed animals have unbelievable recoveries and health improvements once switching on to a raw or fully fresh diet. So
and also
Go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to say, I know that the studies argument is often used a lot, but it's also like, this is the way that dogs have been eating in the wild for their entire existence and thriving on it. So it's like, isn't that a study in and of itself? But, I know compared to the kibble studies and no, the raw industry does not have those same studies. Hopefully that will change over time, but it takes a long time to, get those study results. And also they're very expensive, but it's not like the fad or the trend argument. It just always is so funny to me, because it's like, someone didn't just invent this. Like, animals have been eating this way in nature each and every day,
Yes. Yeah.
Like, we didn't invent...
even your company, it's not like you're trying to invent something new. You're trying to sell a biologically appropriate diet that closely mimics what they ate 150 years ago up until, 2 million years ago or whatever it was. And I love that you brought that up, is because everybody says, I think is it the BEG diets, boutique, exotic? What's the G?
Great. I think it was the grain-free.
Grain-free. Absolutely. So like you said, the argument is like, don't feed these BEG diets, these boutique, exotic, grain-free diets. They don't have the testing. They could cause this, that. They're the new fad. When in reality, Kibble is the fad. Kibble's been fed for
Yes.
100 years where, even
Right.
before Kenzie and I kind of got into this life, it felt like it'd been fed for the last 50,000 years.
It's true. Everyone feels that way. And I mean, even, before my sister discovered this and, my family we were raised with parents that, are animal lovers. We've always been, taught to treat animals well. I think it's, part of our genes, we all love animals. But even, my own parents didn't. We fed kibble when I was growing up. Like we thought that was what you were supposed to do. And it's so amazing I don't want to say brainwashing, but the extent that people cannot think outside of that. It's like once you see the light, you're kind of like start to think like, what else is there that I think is, that I've been taught to believe is the only right way. So it's cool to explore this world. And, once you start to dig really deep into, how dogs have been eating, for their entire existence. And there's a lot more, books and experts coming out now that are promoting this. And I think that's really helping the whole industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So in terms of your food, what makes your food different than, say, your standard kibble that you run to Walmart and grab?
Yeah. Well, first I would say a lot
aside
more
from
moisture.
the obvious.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot more moisture and nutrients, far fewer carbohydrates and additives. But I think like the important thing to remember about raw diets is, like you were saying, they mimic a dog's ancestral diet, right? Especially ours are based on the prey model raw diet. So the prey animal, approximately 80% muscle meat, connective tissue and fat, 10% organ meat, all of which is secreting organ, and 10% finely ground bone. And so it's just a very simple recipe that's complete and balanced. We do add a small amount of a vitamin and mineral mix for full and proper nutrition. Kibble, on the other hand, is probably the furthest you can get from a dog's ancestral diet, right? It's packed with carbohydrates. It's highly, highly processed. And, it has usually very low animal protein, and the quality of animal protein is, just not there. So I think that we're very careful to not bash kibble. And when years ago, we used to be a lot more extreme and draconian in our approach to it's like all raw or nothing, don't bother feeding raw if you're not going to do it all. And it's just, we've learned that that's just not a realistic or fair approach. Like not everyone can afford to feed 100% raw, or you have different, other lifestyle needs that it just doesn't allow you to do it. So we try to say, like, if you can even feed raw as a topper or a base or a mixer, you're doing an amazing job. It's just adding some fresh, biologically appropriate food to your dog's diet. And it can have amazing overall health benefits. So we've softened our approach. And, even on our website, we allow people to sign up for meal plans and choose their raw percent. So you can choose to feed 25%, 50%, or 75%, or 100% raw. It's really kind of based on your budget and your lifestyle.
Yeah. I love that. So, and that really aligns with our mission too. I was replying to a comment this morning from a separate video, and the person said, so are you saying we shouldn't feed kibble at all? And the response to that is ideally, yes. Like our mission, your mission, people in this world is to just get more people to feed their dogs and cats fresh food. And that's what I really love about your brand is you're not afraid to say, hey, we have a bit more of a premium product. There's a whole argument to be said about, what dog food should cost, and it shouldn't cost, $20, $30 a month. But regardless, you do recognize that like your product is a bit more expensive, and you help people still feed it in any budget range. And I think that's, our biggest mission is accessibility in this space. And so I really just want to commend you on your ability to, like you said, softening your approach and just understanding that your product might be a little bit more expensive than people can afford, but it doesn't mean they can't use it altogether.
Absolutely.
That's true. And go ahead.
Oh, I think one shared experience that no matter who you are or what your thoughts are with like feeding raw as a whole meal or as a topper, one thing that we all go through is, holy shit, this food is doing what to my dog? Like nobody wants to purposefully like do anything to harm their dog. And so that's scary. And so that's something that we have been trying really hard to focus on. Is we're huge Brene Brown fans, and so we are thinking a lot about like shame and shame resilience, and not shaming people for their choices, because as somebody that has a background in marketing, Amy, Kibble has it down.
Oh,
they
they're
know
incredible
how
at
to
marketing.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's still like the pet food market is massive, right? And raw food is still a sliver of that, but because it's also the fastest growing segment of the pet food market. So, I mean, it's never going to be, it's just, at the end of the day, raw food, it's not as convenient, like hands down, it's not as convenient. You cannot just open a bag of dry food and pour it in a bowl. You have to even with ours, but we try to make raw feeding as easy as possible. You still have to thaw it. You still have to open the pack. You have to you have to figure out how to store it. Not figure out, but there's steps. There's more steps involved. And it is more expensive, but because quality costs more. I mean, there's no way we don't want to make it cost prohibitive. It is more expensive than Kibble, and people have been trained, pet parents have been trained to believe that this is how much it should cost for you to feed a dog a month. And but then not considering well, if you start feeding your dog the right way, then, you might actually save money down the road, because you're not paying, thousands of dollars to have a tumor removed, or, all of these health problems that come along with not feeding a healthy diet. And not to say that the raw diets are a panacea, or that they, mean your dog's never going to have any health problems, but it's just like with people. If you eat a healthy whole foods diet, you're going to have a lot less problems and be on a lot less medications, or, things that are just dealing with the symptoms. So I think we've talked about this in the past, but it's just sort of a reallocation of funds when you're for pet ownership, you'll spend more upfront, but less down the line. But it's a hard thing for people to accept, and there's a lot of sticker shock at first, because people are, again, used to paying a certain amount.
Yeah, and it's hard for them to trust, somebody, especially no offense to you, but it's hard for people to trust the business owner or the founder of talking about their own company, saying you're going to save money in the future. But we can attest, we just took our dogs to a holistic vet for the first time, and they hadn't been to the vet in probably 2-3 years.
No, a year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a decent amount of time. We're going maybe once a year for an annual checkup these days, obviously unless problems arise. But I really liked that you talked about how we're not claiming raw food is this holy grail or this, miracle fountain of youth. What we're essentially saying is this highly processed diet that we've come to accept and just think is normal for our dogs causes a lot of issues that just feeding a species appropriate diet could solve. So it's not like this is a cure for cancer, but it's saying your dog is probably less likely to develop cancer because they don't have the chance of developing it from the diet they're eating. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. And it's the same with humans. I mean, we have the same, I think Karen Becker talks about it in The Forever Dog, the idea of gene expression. And it's sort of if you don't, if you start anyone, a human or, a dog, any animal on, the path to health, they're much less likely to develop things that they might have even a predisposition to. So just, again, yes, of course, dogs, can still get cancer. Dogs can still get all sorts of, there's lots of things that, are genetic or, environmental, but this does really give dogs the best chance at a happy, healthy life.
Yep.
I mean, it's really as simple as that. Yeah.
So let's get into the nitty gritty of it. I'm sure this is an argument you've heard a lot. People say, hey, my dog is going to get salmonella or E. coli or some sort of foodborne illness that we accept humans are a little bit more susceptible to. But what's your opinion on that argument, or that
Let's not forget all of the times that human food is recalled for these said things.
And,
just as a pre-note.
Yes, and how many millions of pounds of kibble has been recalled for foodborne illness. With that being said, Amy, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so first I would say that it's really important for people to remember that dogs are biologically equipped to process raw meat. Okay, they are not designed like humans. They have short, simple digestive tracts. They have high level of hydrochloric acid in their stomachs. They have sharp, teeth for ripping and tearing meat. All you have to do is look at an animal, its biological makeup, and it will tell you what they are supposed to be eating. Okay, dogs, we've bred them for their looks and their behavior. Their digestive systems are almost identical to their ancestors. They are designed to process meat. They can eat many things that we've seen them eat. And, we're not rushing to the vet if, they kill a squirrel or something in the backyard. But that being said, we still take safety very seriously. We're still sending food to people that are feeding it. People, are more vulnerable, I guess, to salmonella than dogs. Dogs and cats can handle pathogenic bacteria far better than we can. HPP is an acronym for high pressure processing, and it's a non-thermal pasteurization technology that employs ultra high water pressure to neutralize foodborne pathogens like Listeria, E. coli, salmonella. It is a highly effective USDA approved methodology that is considered all natural because it doesn't use heat, it doesn't use chemicals, it doesn't use non-natural additives. It just uses pressure to neutralize these pathogens. Do we know that dogs and cats can handle, the food without this step? Yes, we do. But it's safer for the people handling it. It's safer, for maybe dogs who have compromised immune systems. It's safer for people feeding it with small children in the home, immunocompromised people. So it's just a really great solution to feed raw safely. Especially when the FDA, speaking of the compliance side, has a zero tolerance policy for bacteria in pet food. So you really have to be doing something in the US as a pet food company to ensure that you're, not selling food with bacteria, dangerous bacteria in it. So that's sort of a long-winded answer to your question, but A, dogs can handle bacteria. B, it's also important to pay attention to safety because of the people feeding it.
So can you explain more about that FDA zero compliance policy? Like, how does that work? What happens if there is salmonella, for example?
So, we have people on our team that deal with this specifically, and I don't want to misspeak, but, basically the FDA has a zero tolerance policy for pathogenic bacteria in all pet food. The raw food is obviously included in that. If you're not using a kill step, which they don't tell you what kill step you have to be using, the company can decide that on their own. Most companies will choose HPP because it's maybe I'm biased, but it's the best one because it's, again, not using any chemicals, heat, non-natural additives. It's a natural way to get the result that you want. So, if you are sending out or selling raw foods that nothing has been done to them to, sort of address the pathogens, then you're probably going to have bacteria in your food just because raw meat it has bacteria, right? So, you could have the potential for a recall. There's lots of things that can happen. But yeah, the FDA does have a zero tolerance policy. So especially as, raw companies get bigger, it's really important to make sure that you're doing something to be compliant in that area.
Totally.
Does that make sense?
If
Okay.
I'm not mistaken, HPP is used in many areas, even outside of raw pet food. Is that right?
Yeah. HPP, it sort of gets this really bad rap in raw pet food. I think, the raw feeding movement started with people that were, and we
The
thank
purists.
them every day.
Yes.
The purists, right?
I know
They're the
what
ones
you're
who yeah. So they're, it's not, is it a processing step? Yes. It's not as natural as not doing it, but it's still, it is natural because there's nothing really, that we're doing it to it besides the pressure. So it's used on baby foods. It's used on, juices, and it's used on, any ready to eat food. So guacamole, salsa. It's also used on fish and other meats. It's really used quite frequently throughout people food too, but you just don't hear about it as much. It's just become this, incendiary topic among raw feeders. But we're very proud to use it. And again, we incur the extra cost because we want to ensure that we're sending a safe product and to us and many other pet food companies in the US, it's totally worth it. And it's, doesn't affect the digestibility. It doesn't affect the nutrients. It doesn't affect the taste. So it's really a great solution.
And I feel like it just makes raw feeding more accessible. We talk about this a lot. We even have people in our comments sometimes saying they wouldn't feed HPP food. And we're like, not exactly sure why, because it's still raw food. I mean, you look at it, you break it up, it looks like you just took some, raw pieces of meat and some vitamins and mixed them together. It's still raw food. It doesn't look any different. It doesn't seem like it tastes any different for the dogs, like you said, but it does allow people who might be immunocompromised to still feed a raw diet and not worry about themselves. So
and not even just yes, thank you. And not even immunocompromised, but just, I would say, the more mainstream consumer, right? Like people have a fear of raw meat. They're like, oh my, because we hear all of this stuff for ourselves, and you're like, but how? So it's sort of, it allows us to get raw into more bowls, I think. And it's a really, really great solution. So
totally. So right now with your business, obviously your mission is to help more people feed their pets raw food. What are the biggest challenges you're facing?
So education and scaremongering, those are the biggest challenges for sure. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of, you guys see this in your own world of doing this. It's like a religion. People have very passionate opinions about why you should or why you shouldn't. And, there's just, everyone's an expert. So it's just really, and it's getting easier, but it's still a huge amount of work to be done to educate people on it. There's a lot of word of mouth power with a product like raw. I think people try it for themselves with their own dogs, and then they see the results in like 2 weeks time, and they want to share it with their friends or the people they meet at the dog park. And it's really exciting when you try a product like this and see the results. You really want to share it with people. I think that, the challenge, related to the education and the fear mongering also can come from the vet community. Although I have to say, we are seeing such a shift in this area, and it's so exciting.
Really?
Yeah, we really are. We have a lot of vets that contact us that want to work with us, conventional vets too, not just holistic
Wow,
vets.
that's very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. We have vets that not only support us and recommend us to their clients, but they feed their own dogs our food and have, we just did an interview recently with one of our clients who's a conventional vet. And, she talks about how, she wasn't taught anything about raw in vet school, but she had her dogs in like agility training, and she was seeing all these other, dogs who are athletes, and they were all fed a raw diet. And she's like, maybe I need to look into this. And her dogs have been suffering from IBD, and she switched them. They're both, one of them never, he would leave his kibble for 24 hours, wouldn't eat it. And now they're both thriving, no longer have any IBD symptoms. She's just a huge proponent. So it's really exciting to have these vets actually reaching out to us.
I bet.
And, the consumers are driving the trend. Their clients are coming in and being like, this is what my dog's eating. The dogs are in amazing shape and health, and their blood work is great. So it's cool to see that there is a shift. I can feel it. It's palpable. It's really awesome. So that's happening. I would say, more specifically, a challenge that we have with our product, and probably a lot of raw companies have this, is the transition to raw is a very delicate, you really have to be able to hold the hand of the pet parent through that process, because what happens is people start from a place of fear or uncertainty. And so if anything goes wrong at all, or not wrong, but if there's if it's anything but perfect, it's really easy to be like, whoa, this isn't right for my dog, or there's bacteria, or the food, it's really easy for them to give up quickly. So our challenge is trying to figure out a way to educate people during that process, be there for them, walk them through it, even, have raw experts that are getting on the phone with them, no, it's normal to have loose stools, or it's, normal for your dog. The other thing that happens in the transition, especially if you're switching a dog from kibble or cooked to raw, is that the dog might turn his nose up at it at first, because it's totally different than what they've been conditioned to see as food, right? It has a different temperature, it has a different taste, it has a different smell. There's organ meat. Organ meat is very strong smelling to dogs. So it's also getting people to be patient and persistent in that process and not give up. Personally, we rescued a dog last August. He came to us, he was 2 years old, and he had been on a famous kibble. I won't name the name, but a not very good quality kibble. And I, of course, immediately was like, I'm switching him to our food. And the first week, he was like, what is this? He did not, he was turning his nose. He only wanted the dry kibble. So I did all the topper, I was adding goat milk. I was heating it up a little. I was adding some, canned sardines. And, he had loose stools too during the transition. 2 weeks after, he is now obsessed with the food, has perfect small. It's just, but if I hadn't had that background and I had, been fearful of it, I don't know if I would have stuck with it. You might just say, this isn't right for my dog. So that transition period is really important. And the challenge we're having is getting people, the advice and the support they need during that time so that they don't immediately give up,
Yeah, absolutely. It makes total sense. And to anyone watching this, if you are transitioning or thinking about transitioning your dog, you're probably going to run into some diarrhea. You're probably going to run into a food that your dog doesn't like. We feed either a DIY diet or we feed raw. And Harper and Cooper, we've talked about this before. There are a couple recipes they do not like. They will not touch unless they're mixed with other stuff.
Yeah.
And I truly think that's a direct product of feeding them kibble for like the first couple years of their life and not feeding a lot of other foods.
Yeah, not a lot of variety at all.
Yep. And so this was obviously before we learned about all of this, but I've heard from many different experts that if you feed your dog a single food, probably regardless of what it is, honestly, they will be picky to other new foods because they're just used to that one single thing. So even if you decide to feed feed raw, feed all the proteins if you can. Do a healthy rotation,
Yeah, for sure. And again, if a dog doesn't like a certain protein, that's okay too. You can try it, you can mix it with some other ones and, but you don't have to. It's okay for dogs to have preferences, but we really like to, remind people that dogs, they will not intentionally starve themselves. They're not like cats. You have to be much more careful, but they will eat when they get hungry enough. And, if, there's steps and tips and tricks that you can do to entice them, but if you just know that this is the right diet, I'm going to give it my all and really try it, then, it usually does work. But it can be scary for people that don't have the background. So
I even still get really nervous about a lot of things. Like when you were talking about just a few minutes ago, something, our memory popped into my mind. It was like a couple weeks ago and I had dishes in the sink and Bryce was about to put the cutting board and knife from We Feed Raw into the sink, and I was like, wait a second, I want to get the other dishes out. And he goes, it's no different. And then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, you're right. I was like, so even I still have those thoughts where I'm like,
well, and people don't realize, when handling raw meat, when handling We Feed Raw, whatever it may be, you want to have, specific utensils, you want to wash your hands, you want to clean up. There's definitely steps you want to take, but you should be doing that with your kibble too. That's what nobody's telling people is like your kibble has the same, has similar bacteria or different bacteria, but it still has bacteria. Kibble gets recalled for salmonella. If you're touching your dog's kibble or you're touching your dog's bowl after they eat, you should be washing your hands. You should be changing their bowl every time. It's really no different in terms of how safe you should be.
It's true. It's true. And I think people don't wash their hands as much with kibble. And, I know that kibble is a much bigger. Yeah. So it's like, and I think people tend to be a lot more careful when they're feeding raw. And again, you don't have to wear a hazmat suit. You don't have to fear for your life. Like it's so and you're right, Kenzie. It's like you still have this like, oh my gosh, like this is, but people don't do the same. We have to remind people, it's like, how do you prepare your own raw meats for your family before you cook it at home? It's really no different. And, you have to purchase from a company that we use only human grade USDA, certified meats. We produce in a USDA certified facility. You're getting a very high quality product, and it's HPP. So it's even another step than like what the meat that you're buying at the grocery store goes through. So there's really, I think because, you're also putting it in a bowl on the ground and, your dog can get it, on the surfaces around. I mean, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you're feeding a raw diet, but it really doesn't require that much more work. You don't have to fear for your life. You don't have to worry that you're going to, make your whole family sick. It's really not hard to feed raw safely. If you're buying a good product, it's really not.
So back to what you were saying a little bit about one of the challenges you're facing is the fear mongering. Like I said, we had the episode with Dr. Billinghurst a couple days ago, and he told us something we had no idea is, to preempt this story, vet schools, the reason a lot of vets recommend Kibble, at least from our knowledge, is they're taught this in vet schools. A lot of the textbooks are sponsored by the Kibble companies, and the Kibble companies donate lots of money to get teaching time in front of, young, impressionable vets. But Dr. Billinghurst let us know that there was a Hill's pet nutrition graphic going around that was like toxic foods for dogs. You see those all the time.
Oh, no, he just saw this on their website.
Oh, on their website.
Yeah,
Oh
recently.
my gosh. They list classics, chocolate, onions, and raw meat as a toxic ingredient to a carnivore. I mean, that to me, I think Hills is probably going to be around for a long time, but they lose all their credentials for me just based on that, and many other things. But I mean,
it's so weird it's so strange to me that can even be believed by people who know so much about, an animal's well-being and physiology.
Yeah, their anatomy. Absolutely. All you have to do is really look at their mouth, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. It's really crazy. I mean, I think we're also very careful to not be like anti-vet, because vets are great. I mean, it's not really, if you weren't taught about nutrition in vet school, that's like, it's okay. It's like, it's not, I think Dr. Karen Becker again talks about this in the Forever Dog. It's like, it's not really, they're not trying to tell you to do something wrong. And we really, I know people love to go down the path of, oh, well, they're making all this money off of like the kibble that they're promoting. I really do think that there's just like, it's a flaw in the system that they're not taught about nutrition in vet school. And then, they also see the bad side of like raw diets, right? They see people coming in with poorly concocted homemade raw diets that who knows what those are. I mean, we have people all the time saying, can I just feed hamburger meat? Or like, no, that is not even close to a complete and balanced raw diet. And our food, when, it looks like, because it's all ground together, all of the, the bones and the, organ meat and the muscle meat, it looks like hamburger meat, right? People really, so I think that vets see the bad side of raw diets. They also, wonder how this is becoming more, the HPP raw and raw that's, put through this cold pressure process. Vets are becoming more aware of it. I've noticed when I, read any sort of articles about raw that they'll now say, well, if you're using a brand, to make sure that it's HPP'd. So, but I think there's still a lack of knowledge about it. Like if your issue is with the bacteria, then like, that there's ways that raw companies are addressing that. And there's also, ways that they're addressing, they're making sure that things are complete and balanced. So I think it's just a lack of education in the nutrition portion of, caring for animals. But yeah, it's still, I get more shocked by like the sort of very angry, vehemently anti-raw vets. It's like, are you not even willing to like open your mind to, another way? So yeah, it's just, I think it's a battle that will be sort of like fighting for a while, but it is changing.
Yeah. And it makes sense. We totally agree. And, a lot of people, even in our comments section, say, oh, vets recommend this because they want your dog to keep coming back because they want to make more money, or they recommend this because they get kickbacks. And in reality, like, nobody's going to go spend 8 years in school to willingly harm dogs. It is just they are sharing what they've been taught. And like you said, what you said in the beginning about people switching to raw food and saving a lot of money on future vet bills, that feeds into that argument that vets probably don't see a lot of the quintessential raw feeders. And, like even us, we feed raw, but we don't go to a conventional vet. So we go to a holistic vet. So it's still really conventional vets aren't seeing a ton of the raw feeders. They're seeing the ones that are having issues with trying to do it themselves or whatever it may be. But one argument that always is hilarious to me, and I still see this, like probably 3 days ago I saw this. People say, don't feed raw. It's not balanced. It's like, it can be. Balance it and then feed it.
It don't feed unbalanced raw, right? But like it's really, it's just not a lot of thinking, I guess, sometimes. And people hear, I mean, yeah, it can be imbalanced if you don't do it right.
Right.
You know, but yeah, it's an interesting sort of conundrum, I think, that raw companies have to deal with. This, you know, I don't know, just, we even have clients that say, we go to our vet, but we don't even tell them that we're feeding a raw diet because we don't want to deal with like them, you know, criticizing us. I'm like, no, tell them though, because your dog is so healthy.
I know, right?
The more vets that know, like, don't keep it to yourself. But it's true, like what you're saying, like a lot of, they're either not going to the vet as often as the kibble feeders, or you're just not even talking about it with your vet when you're going. So, you know, they're not learning that this is working. But yeah.
Gotcha. Well, let's go into some of these personal questions. We'll do a little bit more rapid fire with these ones. So, I'm just curious, like, what's one of your biggest failures or one of the biggest challenges you've overcome? Obviously, you know, the start of the business and the passing of your sister, I'm sure, was incredibly difficult, like you mentioned. But what have you been experiencing, say in the last like 6 years or so, that you're struggling with?
It's so crazy because with a business like this, there are failures and wins like every day.
Sure.
There's never, you know, when you have a business, it's just always failure, you know, mini failure. Like it's always something that you're dealing with, some crisis or some, you know. So I don't know if I can just pinpoint one specific thing. I would say personally, being involved in this business, something that was a problem for me, or, you know, I guess looking back could have been, you know, was something I failed at, was just looking at things too microscopically and getting bogged down with like the commentary of the naysayers and the noisemakers. Like I would and you have to remember too, like this is a very personal business for me. I'm so emotionally invested that I'm much more vulnerable, I think. Well, you guys have your own business. It's like, it's just, you can take the criticism a lot more to heart than just another job that you have, or, you know, you can sort of remove yourself or separate yourself. So what I found was that when I would get bogged down and, you know, harp on, you know, the criticisms or the critiques, it was distracting me from like the real work. Like I was spending too much time. So I really have worked on that, and I've noticed a shift for sure. And it's not that these things don't bother me, but I just recover a lot quicker, you know? So like it's just like, I'm over it faster. And I don't know if there's ever a way to not be bothered by those little things, because it just means you're a person and you care. And like, this is a business I care deeply about. And also I want to hear, you know, it's important to be in the mix. Like I'm very much involved in social media. I still am like always like looking in customer service, seeing what people are saying, what's the feedback. Like I do believe like even people that can be, you know, harsh critics, sometimes they have like, there's a good gem of feedback in there that we need to like pay attention to. So I'm always just trying to learn and like understand what people are saying, but also just being able to like cut off the things that aren't useful or productive, or that are going to make me go down, like, you know. So I would say that used to be, you know, a problem for me that I've since worked on, and has I've changed my way of approaching those things, and it's affected how I work, and I've become much more productive and successful as I've learned to deal with that better.
Very cool. Well, and I'm sure that, you know, comments, especially in the beginning, kind of felt like any dig at the company was a personal dig at your sister. I'm sure that had a world of its own feelings, you know.
Yeah, we have, I mean, people will say crazy stuff, as you guys know, I'm
Yeah.
sure. It's like, what the heck? Like, I mean, people, even people that knew my sister, like, are new, used to, when my sister was alive, had been clients and maybe don't agree with like certain changes that we make and would like actually, say, Alyssa would have never wanted that, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's
Those are
hard
fighting
to,
words there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's just, but people also don't know sometimes that like there are real people behind this. It can feel like a really big business that's just like, mass producing this, and it's really not that at all. And we're all, real people that care deeply. And even my customer service team, they're all really invested and dog lovers themselves and feed everyone at this company, and all of our friends and family we feed raw. Like we 100% believe in it. So it's like we feed the exact same food we send to all of our customers. This is like truly, a passionate business that everyone believes in. So, but they can also get hurt by people being really harsh or, having, criticisms about raw feeding. A lot of the social comments that come through our customer service ticket. So, but yeah, it's been a cool journey I don't know what other situation I would have been in that would have allowed me to learn that, which is like, just to take it in and then let it go. It's just sort of like, all right, like, don't let it sit there and fester and like affect everything else. So yeah.
Totally. Well, and we've kind of been experiencing this over the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm sure you have probably since starting this, is like just the rapid growth you go through as a person when you're going through, I mean, not only the adversity of losing your sister, but taking over her company and like trying to turn it into something that can really help a large amount of dogs. Like you learn so much, you go through so much that you just feel like I mean, I don't mean it like you feel like you're aging really fast, but you feel like you just gained so many wise years in this short amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how quickly you learn when you're having to learn, I don't want to say out of like sheer panic, but like it's
Throw
sort of
into the
like this
fire.
intense, and like you don't have a choice. It's like, okay, and you absorb things so much more. It's as much as this has been like really hard work, there's nothing easy about a business like this. People ask me, I'm like, don't do this. This is raw. It's like we're shipping raw frozen meat around the country. You can imagine all the things that can go wrong. But it's also deeply rewarding. And whenever I have any sort of questions about, is this the right way it's like, we can always fall back on we believe in this product so much, and this is like really helping so many dogs. We know we're doing something good. So that really helps whenever I have questions or doubts, and like you always do when you have a business. It's hard. There's nothing not hard about this. And I think the other cool lesson that I've learned is that hard doesn't mean it's wrong. Like if you push through the hard, or bad, right? It's like we can do hard things, but it's such a great saying because it's like such a simple, like, yes, you can do hard stuff. You don't have to give up just because, this doesn't feel right because it's hard, or it's like, granted, some things are hard in the wrong way, but I do think that when it comes to like feeling lucky or, I don't have those feelings necessarily. I think what the feeling is like when you push through the hard, there's this whole other world that opens up of like opportunity that you never would have had you not pushed through that hard. And that can feel like luck. That can feel like magic because it's so unfamiliar to us, right? So we've had a lot of cool things happen because we have just not given up at all.
Yeah.
And I always
one of our favorite quotes, at least mine lately, is it's not the smart person who succeeds. It's the person that doesn't stop. It's the person who literally, another one we love is like living in the discomfort. I'm sure, being a business owner, at least when we did it, it's so uncomfortable. Like it's so, you're on edge. You're like waiting for the next comment. You're waiting for the next issue with shipping. But in that discomfort comes so much learning and so much growth that it makes it well worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you become less uncomfortable as time goes on. Like with the things that are like, if you look back, I bet you guys will say like, wow, like the thing that actually like caused me to lose sleep at night, you know, a few years ago, now you're just like over it in a it's, you know, and that's such a cool, you know, personal growth to experience. I also love the quote from Jay-Z, who it's like, so, he says the genius thing we did was that we didn't give up. And it's like, that's it. Like, it doesn't require any sort of like magic potion or like, you know, oh, what this person's smarter than. It's just like, keep going, don't give up. And like, there's amazing stuff that waits on the other side of that. So yeah.
And it's the ultimate just level of trust, just doing something and trusting it's going to work out. You know, Kenzie and I, we have a pretty large following now, and it kind of looks like this just happened for us. But 5-6 years ago, we started a blog that maybe 100, 200 people total saw in like 4 or 5 months, you know, and then moved on to another thing and tried it, and a few more people saw it, and then a few more, and eventually you get to this point. But I mean, if I could give any advice to anyone listening that's, you know, in a rut or worried about what you're going to do, just find something you're passionate about and work on that, and don't stop working on that, even if it's a little bit, because if you don't stop, you'll wake up in a year, 5 years, 10 years with the exact life that you want to live. And it just, if you start, you're only going to get better at it, which means it can only go up. Like, that's the only thing that can happen.
Yeah, it's true. It's totally true. Yeah.
Speaking on that, you know, especially younger folks that might be listening to this, if you could give a piece of advice to your 18-year-old self or 21 or just your younger self, what would that be? Knowing what you know now.
It's probably not that different than the advice I'd give myself now. But no, not that I'm not a totally different person, but I think that meditate more would definitely be something I would do. More yoga, eat right, which has always been important to me, but it's like very similar to like how when you see the light with like, you know, feeding your dog, like this, it's, if your body is, you know, being nourished in the right way, a lot of the other emotional and mental things sort of fall into place more easily. But if you're not feeling good, or, you know, I used to think when I was younger, like, oh, like I was eating healthy. I was like, I'm going to eat a lean cuisine and like have this like smoothie, you know? So I got really into nutrition, when I was probably in my like early 30s, and it's really changed, just the way I live. So those would be things that I would tell them. And also just going back to, you know, what we were just talking about is just not to get caught up in like the momentary bad things, you know, the distractions, just to be able to bounce back quicker and to kind of like expect the unexpected. It's like allows you, I think, to handle those things easier when they come. You know, it's like if you keep being, oh, why did this happen to me? Like, why me? It's sort of like, okay, well, what am I going to do to grow from this? Or how do I pivot? Just being more resilient.
I love what you said about kind of expect the unexpected. That's one thing I'm working on in therapy. And another way I say it is to almost like have no expectations, like go into something not expecting, you know, one thing to happen or another thing to happen or to work out this way, and just try to go with the flow and just accept life as it comes. Because, you know, you'll create all these plans. We've created a bunch of plans and millions of them have not come to fruition, you know, but it wouldn't change anything because we just, I don't know, it worked out with the level of trust and just trying not to have those expectations. It's an active struggle, but
it's hard. It's hard. Yeah, it's constant. I mean, of course you're going to have, I think, you know, the expectations are sort of a normal part of having a vision for something, but I guess being able to not get so attached to the expectation or the narrative, and if it doesn't play out that way, like you're unable to see the other good things that are happening, you know. So I agree with that.
That's great insight. So what does your daily routine look with what does your daily routine look like with your pets? You know, I'm assuming feed them once or twice a day, go take them for a run or something.
Yeah, I mean, so we rescued our dog last August. He's a wire-haired pointing griffon. I've never had a dog like that. He's a hunting dog. I mean, we don't hunt, but that's what they're bred for. So he's very smart, and he needs a lot of exercise. So, which is good because we're an active family, but I usually wake up really early at like 5:30. We also have a 5-year-old, so I try to wake up early so I could like have some time to like,
Totally smart.
have coffee and like before. So Watts is the name of our dog. He gets up with me and we kind of go on the couch and I read the news and I let him out, and then he eats once a day. It's just easier. I've I'm curious to know more about, the intermittent fasting and whether once or twice a day is better. I know we've done like polls with our followers and most people do feed twice a day. But it's interesting, some of the research that's coming out with feeding your dog once a day. He eats 24 ounces of We Feed Raw.
Wow.
Yeah, he's 70 pounds. So, and then we usually take him, we try to get him 2 miles every day because he needs that kind of exercise. Luckily, we live right by a park. So my husband will either take him on the bike and he runs beside the bike, or I'll take him for a walk or a run. And that's what he hangs out with us all the time. He's definitely attached to us.
Yeah,
we have to sometimes, when we got him, he was very needy, and we've actually, did a lot of training with him with professional trainers, and he's in a lot better place. And he has a crate that we sometimes use for him, but like if we go out, he still goes in the crate, but he doesn't sleep in it at night or anything, but it's there and he's a lot better. But he has a tendency, I think this breed, any sort of family oriented breed has a tendency to get like, they're like following you everywhere. So we sometimes have to force the separation a little, like, okay, you need to go in that room for a minute. But yeah, that's sort of our routine.
Love it. Yeah, I need to take a video next time I go, but I we'll just run into the bathroom right over here, and it's like, how many, like 10, 20 square feet? I mean, it's tiny. It's literally a sink and a toilet. And I go in, and all three of we have 2 Aussies, about 35, 45 pounds, and then some sort of husky mix. It's like 60 pounds, and they're all standing right there looking at me. They're like, as I'm going to the bathroom, and I'm like, guys, there's nowhere for me to like leave. There's no back door I'm gonna dip out of.
Yeah, I know. They're like, just
totally
want to make sure.
Yeah, totally get that. So this question's a little bit obvious, so I'm going to challenge you a little more and say you can't say about raw feeding. But if you were to write a book tomorrow, what topic would that be about? Like, what do you think is very important, even if it doesn't pertain to dogs, but it can?
Yeah. Well, I actually did write a book when I was younger.
Oh, wow.
Nothing to do with raw feeding. It was many years ago, but I wrote a book because I'm a writer by profession. I mean, trade. That's really kind of like what I used to do that before this. I mean, I was a copywriter and worked in marketing, and I used to write for magazines, and I did write a book. It's a pretty funny guidebook on like living with roommates after college. So it was sort of the do's and don'ts of like women living with roommates after college, and all the crazy stuff. I lived in New York City for 18 years, so you can imagine all the crazy things that happen when.
Of course. Yes.
So, anyways, that's a book I did write, and I think you can get it like used on Amazon now for like $0.01. So if you really,
that's awesome though.
So yeah, I would like to write a book again someday. I think a little bit more, I guess serious than that one, but I don't know. I guess, the whole experience of doing this work and, sort of taking on my sister's passion for it, which isn't to say I wasn't also passionate about this, but it's really amazing to sort of have this, like, it's almost like we're still working together, it's like, and she was always like a very out of the box thinker. And like, she knew that this was like what to do. And like, she never questioned whether this was right, or like, she didn't like, of course, you get affected by negative or people, difficult customers, but she was always like, no, like she believed in it. And I think I don't have that out of the box thinking as much, but I do know how to work with something and create a brand out of it. And so I think like we've come together in this way to build this company. And I'm so grateful for her just inventiveness, and not that she invented the idea of raw feeding, but just to have a raw meal plan delivery. So like, it doesn't, even to this day, there's really not many that do what we do. So I think something, again, writing a book, it's like a hard thing everyone wants to write, but you really have to have unique idea that doesn't exist already that people would want to read. And I think maybe I think there's something special about this whole experience and, carrying on my sister's legacy and all of the crazy stuff that has happened along the way, because there has been a lot of crazy stuff.
Well, I would absolutely. Sorry to interrupt. I would absolutely read a biography or an autobiography about that, because like you said, it's just it is such a weird experience to hear about, like you said, you do have like the passion for it, but you did have to take on that passion and, kind of build it in yourself because it wasn't in you initially like it was for your sister. So that's super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think like we were very close. We were only 2 years apart, and like we have always been like best friends. So I always had a connection to this. This was something she created, and when she was alive, I had a connection to it. But I've also been able to learn more about her as I sort of started, taking on this business and, all of the things that she knew. And so it's been a cool kind of magical experience in that way. There's been times I'm like, is this a blessing or a curse? I don't know. There's some days when you feel like, but it definitely is a blessing. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's not a gift that was just handed to me like, here you go. Here's a nice, easy business for you to take on and like have fun. It's like a gift because it has been hard work. And I have had to there's things that I've had to learn how to do that I never thought before that was even close to in my wheelhouse, and probably still isn't in my wheelhouse, but I've learned, and because I care so much. So in that sense, it's been, I think, a unique experience. I think the story in and of itself is unique. So probably something about that, a story about that.
Love it. So I'm curious. I didn't write this question down, but we've only known We Feed Raw in its current state, with the branding and what you guys do currently. When your sister passed, what state was the company in? I mean, it sounds like you've built up a lot of stuff.
So, when the company first started, it was called Sad Dog Sushi. So SAD was, I know it's like not the best acronym, but it was SAD was an acronym for Species Appropriate Diet. And like all of they had like a menu and it was all like based on like sushi roll names. So like, I can't even remember all the names. So it was all like this, but they used to drive around Austin, Texas with their little Honda Element that they delivered the food, and they had the Sad Dog Sushi stickers on the car, and my sister would say, like, sometimes people would be like, wait, is this like dog sushi, like dog meat?
oh goodness.
I know, but anyways, they ended up changing. So my sister's fiance, his name is Rich Real, Reel. So like the second name was Real Raw, but spelled R-E. But that was also confusing to people because people were like real, like as in fish, or like film reel, or
sure.
And people didn't know if it was like an adult film company.
Got it.
So anyways, we did go through a rebrand after my sister passed. That was part of, my project. And we hired this awesome creative agency out of Austin, Texas called Preacher. And we came up with a lot of different names, but our favorite one was just We Feed Raw. And it's kind of like, people sometimes are like, it causes them to pause. It's not like a cutesy name, but it's just very much like we always say it's like our friendly rallying cry. It's like the name of our company and our friendly rallying cry, like We Feed Raw,
Yeah. I know. I'm thinking of somebody asking us like, what do you feed? And we're like, We Feed Raw. And they're like, yeah, but what brand? Like, We Feed Raw. It's like, no, tell me.
I know. Exactly.
That's
exactly.
Smart.
We get that. Yeah. So we just, I think it's unapologetically like just straightforward what we are. But, the brand has been it's a huge asset for us, like, of course, after the product, but there's not a lot of great branding in pet food, especially raw pet food. And we have this like cool, modern, clever brand that people want to work with, like you guys. And I think it resonates with, the demographics that happen to be the largest pet owning demographics. So it's really been helpful, and it's really given us credibility in the marketplace. So it's been really fun to work on that. That's part of it, is my contribution in a big way. I mean, other things too, but that has really been where my skill set has come in. So yeah, so it was Sad Dog Sushi, then it was Real Raw, and then after my sister passed, we changed it to We Feed Raw. I mean, when my sister was alive, there's a lot of things. We've changed so many. We used to do, I think it was like, because it was still small, you know, they could try to be everything to everyone. So it was like, we used to measure out the meal down to like the ounce for like your custom meal. But there's just a lot of ways that we couldn't scale with how they were doing it previously. We used to do bones on the side. Like you could get bones on the side or you could get the bones ground in. So we were actually sending like the raw meaty bones but that's also hard too, because it's not for the not that we're super mainstream now, but any sort of even semi-mainstream consumer is not going to know what the heck to do with the bone on the side, you know, raw meaty bone. And there's like, you have to really educate the person on like, you know, choking hazards and all that. So we switched to only doing the bone ground in. We still have 6 protein options, but I think at one time we had like 9 or 10. I mean, it's just like a lot more selection and variety, but it was also just like too much, you know, it was like
a little restricting.
Yeah, we used to do our own manufacturing. So we used to have our own manufacturing facility in Maine. It was before we were HPP too. So lots of things that we've done to be compliant, to be safe, to be able to scale. Also, we've partnered with a PhD nutritionist. You know, there's lots of things that we've done to just kind of button up the business in good ways.
Yeah. So when your sister still had the business and was kind of running things, were you shipping products, or were products being shipped, or was it all local still?
Yes. So after she was diagnosed with cancer, they were still living in Austin, but my family and I kind of we were all on the East Coast. Like I was in New York, my dad was in Maine, my mom was in Boston. We moved my sister and Rich to Maine to be closer to us. And at that point, she moved the business to an online business where they could ship nationally. So while that move was sort of done for a sad reason, it also helped to grow the business exponentially because suddenly it's like available to so it just started growing and growing then too. And then to the point where we had like, when they first moved to Maine, we're in like one facility and we outgrew that facility and then got a bigger facility. So yeah, it was really at the time that they moved from Austin to Maine that they stopped just being exclusive to Austin.
Very cool.
But Austin was a great place to start.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
especially with the local, you know, delivery. I'm sure there was a pretty decent sized crowd there wanting to feed their dogs healthier. So
yeah. Sure.
Well, we're a little over an hour here. So last thing I just want to briefly touch on is I want you to let our audience know where they can find you. You know, social media, website, anything you got going on. Where can they find you at?
So you can order our food at wefeedraw.com. And we're, again, an online business, so that's our storefront. We can be reached at hello@wefeedraw.com. We are also on Instagram at wefeedraw. TikTok at WeFeedRaw, TikTok, and YouTube, WeFeedRaw. So those are our main channels. But yeah, we're very fast to respond. We have a great team of people. It's not like if you reach out to us, we won't get back to you for 2 days. We're usually like lightning fast. So we're happy to hear from everyone and answer questions and give advice and help.
Yeah. And to
get
give our
set up on right time.
And to give our experience of that, you know, whenever we share a video about We Feed Raw, speaking to our audience now, they always come on and are answering questions from our community even before we can, or even ones that we don't. So I think that one of your strong suits is for sure, number one, transparency. I mean, you coming on and being willing to talk about this, the CEOs of Kibble companies, I don't think are going to come on our podcast and talk about their product. So I think it definitely creates that level of trust, you know, where people can say, people can see how passionate you are and just see the drive you have to helping people feed a real diet. So I want to say thank you for, you know, personally from Kenzie and I. It's an absolute honor to have you on, and we obviously love you and your product and everything. But just as a thank you from our audience as well, just providing some value and some insight into the raw feeding world, and hopefully this helps tip some people over the edge into actually considering it and giving it a shot. Because as we talked about for the last hour, the benefits are just unreal once you get going. So,
well, thank
Amy,
you guys, and you guys, I'm super grateful for you guys and everything you're doing to educate people, it's really important. And again, coming from people like you versus like, you know, a founder of a company, as much as we can be as honest and transparent as possible, it holds more weight when it's coming from people that,
Sure.
you know, don't really have any, you know, it's just, it just is really effective. And I love what you guys are doing, and it's really awesome for pet parents. So keep it up.
Thank you so much. Well, to our audience, you'll definitely be hearing more of Amy very soon. And I, again, just can't thank you enough, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks,
guys.
Amy. Thank you, everyone. As always, we're Bryce and Kenzie. We'll see you on the next episode of the BK Petcast, and tell your pets we said hello.